So not so long ago, we took a trip to Daiso and I shared my art and stationery haul with you. While I was at Daiso, I picked up 2 watercolor sets, a regular color set, and then the dusty color set because they are just so pretty. So today, I'm going to see if these super cheap watercolors are worth your money and worth a trip to Daiso. All right, I know you guys were waiting for this. These are the watercolors from Daiso. So I have the watercolor or the water paints dusty color. Here you go. They look like that, as well as like that. Unfortunately, the information is written in Japanese, but we do have a cancer and reproductive harm warning. And then here are the regular watercolors. Here are the colors in this set. And again, here they are on the back. And this one doesn't have a reproductive harm warning. So the colors in the dusty set, these are not in English. I am sure somebody would be able to translate these, but it will not be me today. But the colors in the regular set do have the English names also included. So we have black, navy blue, blue, purple, green, yellow, green, red, vermilion, brown, yellow, ochre, yellow, and white. And since these were purchased at Daiso, I know they were cheap. I don't remember how cheap. Because Daiso's kind of like Five Below. It's like a combination between Five Below and Dollar Tree, where if it's not marked, it's like $2.15 USD. And if it is marked, it's whatever price is marked. So it can make it a little bit challenging. It can be way too easy to spend too much money at Daiso. We were literally just talking about that in my art-centric Discord server, the Paint Box, that it can be a little easy to spend a lot of money at Daiso. Of course, you do go home with a lot of stuff. If you guys are curious, I actually shared the haul video for this. In fact, we demonstrated the brush washing machine in that video. So if you guys are curious what kind of stuff I picked up when I went to the Houston Daiso, actually I went to 2 Houston Daisos. I hope you guys will check that out. This was picked up at the first store we visited. And there is a lot of wrapping going on. Those colors are so pretty. Look, they look kind of like makeup, don't they? And they are in these little plastic tubes, kind of reminiscent of Niji watercolors. And I don't have high hopes for these. Let me just make that like crystal clear. I don't think these are going to be phenomenal. But as somebody who enjoys Kaiteki Art's YouTube channel, I know you can do some pretty impressive stuff with art supplies from Japanese dollar stores. So I'm going to keep an open mind. Now, here on the channel, I do enjoy reviewing cheap art supplies. I am currently working on a review of Amazon Basics watercolors, and I have taken a look at watercolors from Dollar Tree, Five Below, Walmart, all sorts of inexpensive places. So Daiso is just right up my alley. And a few years ago, when I went to Japan, I basically recorded almost everything we did and shared it with you guys, but I hit a bunch of Daisos. Okay, it took a while to get those out. So here are our 2 sets. Now, what I am hoping to do today is I have here a clear plastic pencil case. This was also purchased at Daiso. I also have some mixing trays. I may or may not use these today. But what I'm hoping to do is to set these watercolors up in half pans and have them in this clear plastic case. Honestly, could just get the plastic cases. Let's try something real quick. It's not what I'm going to do, but it might be something you might want to do. Okay, you definitely have to take it out of the tray. Will it fit? Oh, look. Whoa, that's so satisfying for me for some reason. We're not doing that, although it does look much nicer like that. We're gonna set these up in half pans. We're going to swatch them while they are still wet, and then I will allow them to dry out for a week, and we will swatch them again after they've had a chance to dry. Now, these are dusty color, kind of like Morandy colors. I expect these to be more opaque. I expect these to be more pastel. I have adjusted my expectations for these. Actually, I don't know whether these are going to handle more like Japanese watercolors, so more like Gensai style watercolors, or if they're going to handle more like Western style watercolors, or if they're going to handle like Chinese watercolors. So who knows, but hopefully we can kind of dig into it today. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get these potted into half pans. So I need to pick out 24 of these half pans, attach some double stick tape to the back, and set them up in our pencil case here. It took a while and I had to use a different tape, but I've got all of my half pans in place. So I want to keep it in order of sets. So we're going to have the regular watercolors at the top and then the dusty colors at the bottom. Move that aside. And I do want to do at least one from each set live with you guys. So I guess we will start with black. So these are fairly small tubes. And the, let's say, basic colors do have the English name on them. There is no pigment information. So it's like, this is probably not how they're meant to be used. You're probably meant to dollop a little bit of paint on, say, a ceramic palette. And it's probably hard to get all of the paint out of these, just given like the sturdiness of the tubes themselves. I could like really squeeze them and get all the paint out, but that isn't necessarily my intention. I don't know how well these will hold up to being dried out. Okay, now for the dusty colors. These do not have their English name anywhere on there, but there are a lot of decent pre-mixed skin tones. Also, the Daiso I bought these at, this is what they had, because believe me, if they had had more, I probably would have tried out more. That impulse control is very weak when it comes to art supplies and sharing that with you guys. I think the colors in the dusty color set are very pretty. It kind of reminds me of makeup. And it's some of my favorite colors as well. I have a feeling that the dusty colors would probably be most successfully used as like almost like a gouache. Like, so very thickly applied with the consistency of cream, not really watered down. And also these kind of remind me of Turner's Japanesque colors or Japanese colors that I talked about here on the channel a while back. It's just that kind of color palette. Also kind of reminds me a little bit, just in terms of the colors, of Holbein's Iridori line. They had a watercolor line and now they just have a gouache line of those colors. In fact, I need to circle back to that. Also kind of reminds me of Sui, S-U-I, gouache in terms of just the colors. And that is something else we need to circle back to in the future. So each set had 12 colors. That gives us a total of 24 colors to swatch. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to swatch them wet, let them set up in these half pans, and then see how well they reconstitute. But as it is, like I said, those dusty colors are very pretty. So even though these are from Daiso, my paper is not. We're going to be swatching on Blick Premier 100% cotton watercolor paper. and I am going to lay down a couple of lines so that we can test opacity. I have a feeling that is going to be an important quality today. And also help us decide if these handle more like Chinese or Japanese style watercolors or Western style watercolors. I want to try and make sure I leave room for me to swatch these again after they've had a chance to fully dry. So I am going to be absolutely ridiculous. When I went to Daiso, like I said, I found, really Joseph found, this tiny washing machine that is ostensibly perhaps for washing brushes. So I thought that could be just a lot of fun to use today. Why not? Now, Daiso didn't have any watercolor brushes that I was like, thought would be worth spending money on. So I'm just using one of my regular ones. And we're gonna start with black. And I'm going to do a mass tone swatch, and then I'm gonna do a blended out swatch. And since this is so wet, it is hard not to just pick up too much paint. These are actually pretty weak. And then you want to be careful not to chew up your nice brushes like this. So pretty ridiculous. And then when we're done, we can actually use the tiny little hose to drain it out rather than just like dumping it straight out. And I will actually clean out the water at some point because this isn't a lot of water and it's going to get polluted really quickly. So this is really more of a novelty than, you know, a functional option. But it was too funny to can maybe even put some pink soap in there and really make a mess. Do one more live swatch. And I have a feeling I'm having trouble controlling the water to paint ratio. So I'm hoping that when these have had a chance to dry out, I'll have an easier time with these. I know I'm making somebody cringe really hard with the tiny washing machine.
I don't really have a lot of show notes for these because you guys can pretty much tell what's going on, but these are pretty difficult to control color-wise while they're still wet from the tube. You guys can see that we're getting areas of buildup and areas of patchiness. We're also getting a lot of grittiness and graininess with these. These have basically no coverage, so they're very similar to Dollar Tree or Five Below watercolors, and I've reviewed both of those if you guys are curious.
So I'm not really surprised that these don't handle particularly well. Maybe after they've had a chance to dry, it might be easier to pick up some pigment. It might just kind of... Sometimes that fixes, like with Reeves, letting Reeves dry out used to kind of help fix it, make it easier to deal with. So, you know, we will see in about a week. But now I want to swatch the dusty colors, and I want to do it two different ways. I want to do a, like we just did up here, but I also want to do it where it's just mass tone on the black to see how opaque they are.
I apologize for the camera bugging out. One of the problems with recording, especially if I have the setup way high above my head, is that I don't always catch when we're having focus problems, and there's really not much that I can do in post, so I apologize. I had some hopes for the dusty colors because they are so pretty. They are not a whole lot better than the regular ones. They're just a little bit more opaque. Since they're a little bit more opaque, I decided I wanted to do mass tone swatches underneath to see if they could maybe handle like gouache.
Okay, probably to nobody's surprise, if you're familiar with Daiso, some of their stuff is great and some of their stuff is, well, anyway. So, neither of these watercolors really do very well as watercolors, at least not straight from the tube. We will let them dry, we will find out. So I decided to try the dusty colors in kind of a gouache concentration. And as you guys can see, they haven't dried yet. It's still not great. It's very cheap, but you're gonna really struggle with these. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to top these off a little bit more. Well, maybe not. Maybe I'll just let them dry as they are, and let them dry out for a week. Come back to it, and we'll try re-swatching. So it's been about a week, and something that really shocked me is how much these Daiso watercolors seem to shrink. I know I didn't really put a lot in there to begin with, and I never went back and topped them back up because, I don't know, they might handle better straight from the tube, but they shrank so much. So it is time to reactivate them and re-swatch them. I'm going to go ahead and give these a spritz. Don't know if they need them, but why not? Right, there we go. It is the moment of truth. I really hope they handle better because I'd love to be able to do something with them, and also because I already have friends who have told me that they also have this set, so I'm crossing my fingers that we'll like figure out a way to use these. And also Kaiteki, I know I'm not Kaiteki, okay, but like she has the ones from one of the other Japanese Dollar Tree and she can make them work. So I'm kind of hoping we can figure something out here.
So after a week of allowing them to dry out, I had hoped that they would be a little bit easier to control, and they actually are, but that doesn't make them more saturated or even really that much better. They're still very weak with not a whole lot of color, but let's be real. I paid $2.50, $2.25 for these at Daiso. What was I expecting? Same thing for the dusty colors. They are just really weak when you let them dry out like this. I did try to really saturate them, hoping that if they absorb some water, they might loosen up a little bit and we could get some good swatches out of them.
Unfortunately, these are pretty terrible. I'd had hopes for them, and they have failed me. I should not be surprised. They only cost me about $2, but still, here we are. These are so cheap that they might be worth your time figuring out how to fix them. I don't really have any good suggestions for how to fix them. They just don't have enough pigment to be worth adding some gum arabic or some aquazol to try and even things out. They shrink down to basically nothing, so they're probably full of water. And if you do buy these, using them straight from the tube while they're still wet might be your best bet to get anything worthwhile out of these. I really wanted to field test these because honestly, I love when cheap art supplies do well. It makes art more accessible to more people, and it's always disappointing when cheap art supplies are terrible because I just think of all the people who get turned away from making art because they got discouraged by something like this. That's not to say that Daiso doesn't have art supplies that are worth your time, mostly the pencils and the pens, but these watercolors are definitely not it, and who's surprised that I am absolutely not Kaiteki art? So I'm gonna think about this because these are really not good, but I really do want to try and do something of a field test with them. So I'm gonna try to let that thought marinate and see if I can come up with anything.
I have this cute little cotton watercolor paper sketchbook here that I decided I wanted to try doing the wet into wet test. Now, since these didn't reconstitute so well, I am just working straight from the tube like this. And I'm working fairly thickly. I'm going to handle them similar to gouache. Now, just straight up wet into wet with the two colors I chose, it actually made me somewhat hopeful. I thought the colors were really pretty. I liked the way they diffused on this more textured paper. I felt like they handled, you know, maybe okay. But given how cheap these are, I really wouldn't recommend them for anything than maybe trying to get like some textured scans. After my wet into wet test dried, and I was actually pretty satisfied with how it looked, I decided to try handling the dusty colors as well as a couple of the regular colors very, very thickly, like heavier than cream consistency. So kind of like gouache, to see if I could maybe salvage this. And I tried painting a little flower design. I have to say, even at like really heavy saturation like this, they're still not as opaque as you would want for something similar to gouache. And okay, look, they are very, very cheap watercolors. Anything I compare these to, Turner Watercolors, Holbein Watercolors, is going to be way more expensive, but it is going to perform a lot better. For cheap watercolors, they are fairly fun. They are a cheap thrill. They could be something to scratch and itch if you're on a trip and you have a Daiso nearby. Are they meant to replace your normal watercolors? No, probably not. But if you're in a pinch and you want to do a little watercoloring and you know you're going to have to handle these very differently from your regular watercolors, more like tempera maybe, these could be fun. Do I recommend them? For $2.25 if there's a Daiso in your area and you want to play around with them? Yeah, sure. I mean, you probably are not going to like them, and I don't think they're great, but I think for the price they're fine. But that said, I can't really recommend them as watercolors. They do have significant limitations, and you may just find yourself chucking these in the trash. So your mileage may vary with these. With these, my caveat would be it depends on your tolerance for cheap watercolors. If you're the sort of person who, if you got a real value for them, a real bargain for them, you can put up with a lot, or you're just looking for them for one or two specific things, these are fine. But I do think they're going to be the sort of thing that people like me are going to impulse buy because they're very cute and they have high hopes for them. They're going to try them out once and be disappointed with them and then not pick them up again. My fear with these is that somebody who is interested in watercolor will pick these up and find them frustrating to use, or just think that they outright dislike watercolor. And I would hate for these to be the thing that kept somebody from enjoying watercolor. So if you're watching this and you're new to watercolor, no, I wouldn't really recommend these for a beginner watercolor artist. I have a review of praying watercolors that I think you guys will find interesting and will be much more in line, I think, with what you can expect for very cheap watercolors for someone who's just interested in dabbling around with watercolors.
All right, guys, let's talk about the pros and cons with these. We're going to start on a positive note. These are very cheap and the colors are very pretty in the tube. So now for the cons. These are very cheap. And with just a couple exceptions, the colors are pretty in the tube and useless everywhere else. They have no coverage at all. Also, these things hate water, so it's a struggle to get them to mix while wet, a struggle to get any sort of color out of them when dry. I'm sure someone can get something useful out of these, but sadly, it was not me.
So if you're interested in cheap and fun art supplies and you haven't watched my Daiso haul yet, I highly recommend you do. It'll be linked in the cards as well as in the description below. I think their stationery supplies are a really great value for what you get, and I actually regularly use my Daiso stationery supplies, but their art supplies can be kind of hit or miss and your mileage may vary. But all in all, for a cheap thrill, they are a lot of fun and possibly worth picking up.
So unfortunately, these watercolors fell flat for me. They do not work straight from the tube. They do not work dried out in half pans. They have basically no coverage whatsoever, and they really don't like water. So I recommend you save your money and you skip the Daiso watercolors. The only exception I would make is if you are looking to create the set of an artist, like for a film or a skit or something. These are an affordable way to do it because honestly, these are not good for anything but being a prop. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you found it entertaining, at least helpful, useful, and informative. If you like what I do, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to my channel. I know a lot of you guys think you are already subscribed. Please double check for me. It would mean the world to me. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Bye, guys.